Mayor's Library, page 129. Certainly something of great magnitude was coming toward 33 Himmel Street, to which Liesl was currently oblivious. To distort an overused human expression, the girl had more immediate fish to fry. She had stolen a book, someone had seen her, the book thief reacted appropriately. Every minute, every hour, there was worry, or more to the point, paranoia. Criminal activity will do that to a person, especially a child. Now, we remember who saw the girl. Based on last chapter, you figured out that it was the mayor's wife. So now she's worried to go to the mayor's house because she's afraid she's going to get in trouble. They envision a prolific assortment of cut-outedness. Some examples: people jumping out of alleys, school teachers suddenly being aware of every sin you've ever committed, police showing up at the door each time a leaf turns or a distant gate slams shut. For Liesl, the paranoia itself became the punishment, as did the dread of delivering some washing to the mayor's house. It was no mistake, as I'm sure you can imagine, that when the time came, Liesl conveniently overlooked the house on Grantstrasse. She delivered to the arthritic Helena Schmidt and picked up at the Katlalen Weingartner residence, but she ignored the house belonging to Bergmeister Heinz Hermann and his wife Ilsa. Another quick translation: Bergmeister means mayor. On the first occasion, she stated that she simply forgot about that place, a poor excuse if I've ever heard one. As the house straddled the hill overlooking the town, and it was unforgettable. When she went back and still returned empty-handed, she lied that there was no one home. No one home? Mama was skeptical. Skepticism gave her an itch for the wooden spoon. She waved it at Liesl and said, "Get back over there now, and if you don't come home with the washing, don't come home at all." Really? That was Rudy's response when Liesl told him that what Mama had said. You want to run away together? We'll starve. I'm starving anyway, they laughed. No, she said, I have to do it. They walked the town as they usually did when Rudy came along. He always tried to be a gentleman and carry the bag, but each time Liesl refused. Only she had the thread of the Voschen loitering over her head, and therefore only she could be relied upon to carry the bag correctly. Anyone else was more likely to manhandle it, twist it, or mistreat it in even the most minimal way, and it was not worth the risk. Also, it was likely that if she allowed Rudy to carry it for her, he would expect a kiss for his services, and that was not an option. Besides, she was accustomed to its burden. She had swapped the bag from the shoulder to shoulder, relieving each side every 100 steps or so. Liesl walked on the left, Rudy the right. Rudy talked most of the time about the last soccer match on Himmel Street, working in his father's shop, and whatever else came to mind. Liesl tried to listen but failed. What she heard was the dread chiming through her ears, growing louder the closer they stepped toward Grantstrasse. What are you doing? Isn't this it? Liesl nodded that Rudy was right, for she had tried to walk past the mayor's house to buy some time. I'll go on, the boy hurried her. Molten was darkening, the cold was climbing out of the ground. Move it, Zalmunch. He remained at the gate. After the path, there were 8 steps up to the main entrance of the house, and the great door was like a monster. Liesl frowned at the brass knocker. What are you waiting for? Rudy called out. Liesl turned and faced the street. Was there any way at all for her to evade this? Was there another story, or let's face it, another lie that she'd overlooked? We don't have all day, Rudy's distant voice again. What the hell are you waiting for? You shut your trap, Steiner? It was a shout delivered as a whisper. What? I said, shut up, you stupid sockerel. With that, she faced the door again, lifted back the brass knuckle, and tapped it 3 times, slowly. Feet approached from the other side. At first, she didn't look at the woman, but focused on the washing bag in her hand. She examined the drawstring as she passed it over. Money was handed out to her, and then nothing. The mayor's wife, who never spoke, simply stood in her bathrobe, her soft, fluffy hair tied back into a short tail. A draft made itself known, something like the imagined breath of a corpse. Still, there were no words, and when Liesl found the courage to face her, the woman wore an expression not of reproach, but utter distance. For a moment, she looked over Liesl's shoulder at the boy, then nodded and stepped back, closing the door. For quite a while, Liesl remained, facing the blanket of the upright wood. Hey, Zalmunch. No response. Liesl. Liesl reversed, cautiously. She took the first few steps backward, calculating. Perhaps the woman hadn't seen her steal the book after all. It had been getting dark. Perhaps it was one of those times when a person appears to be looking directly at you, when in fact, they're contentedly watching something else or simply daydreaming. Whatever the answer, Liesl didn't attempt any further analysis. She'd gotten away with it, and that was enough. She turned and handled the remainder of the steps normally, taking the last three all at once. Let's go, Stockrell. She even allowed herself a laugh. 11-year-old paranoia was powerful. 11-year-old relief was euphoric. A little something to dampen the euphoria. She had gotten away with nothing. The mayor's wife had seen her all right. She was just waiting for the right moment. A few weeks passed, soccer in Hill Street, reading the shoulder shrug between 2 and 3 o'clock each morning, post-nightmare, or during the afternoon in the basement. Another benign visit to the mayor's house. All was lovely, until... When Liesl next visited, minus Rudy, the opportunity presented itself. It was pickup day. The mayor's wife opened the door, and she was not holding the bag like she normally would. Instead, she stepped aside and motioned with her chalky hand and wrist for the girl to enter. I'm just here for the washing. Liesl's blood had dried inside of her. It crumbled. She almost broke into pieces on the steps. The woman said her first word to her then. She reached out, cold-fingered, and said, "Wait." When she was sure the girl had steadied, she turned and walked hastily back inside. Thank God, Liesl exhaled. She's getting in. Get me in the washing. What the woman returned with, however, was nothing of the sort. When she came and stood with an impossibly frail steadfastness, she was holding a tower of books against her stomach, from her navel at the beginnings of her breast. She looked so vulnerable in the monstrous doorway, long white eyelashes, and just the slightest twinge of expression, of suggestion. Come and see it said. She's going to torture me, Liesl decided. She's going to take me inside, light the fireplace, and throw me in, books and all. Or she'll lock me in the basement without any food. For some reason, though, most likely the lure of the books, she found herself walking in. The squeaking of her shoes on the wooden floorboards made her cringe, and when she hit a sore spot, inducing the wood to groan, she almost stopped. The mayor's wife was not deterred. She only looked briefly behind and continued on, to a chestnut-colored door. Now her face asked a question. Are you ready? Liesl craned her neck a little, as if she might see over the door that stood in her way. Clearly, that was the cue to open it. Jesus, Mary. She said it out loud, the words distributed into a room that was full of cold air and books. Books everywhere. Each wall was armed with overcrowded yet immaculate shelving. It was barely possible to see the paintwork. There were all different styles and sizes of lettering on the spines of the black, the red, the gray, the every-colored books. It was one of the most beautiful things Liesl remembered to have ever seen. With wonder, she smiled that such a room existed. Even when she tried to wipe the smile away from her with her forearm, she realized instantly that it was pointless exercise. She could feel the eyes of the woman traveling her body, and when she looked at her, they had rested on her face. There was more silence than she had ever thought possible. It extended like an elastic dying to break. The girl broke it. Can I? The two words stood among acres and acres of vacant wooden-floored land. The books were miles away. The woman nodded. Yes, you can. Steadily the room shrank till the book thief could touch the shelves within few small steps. She ran the back of her hand along the first shelf, listening to the shuffle of her fingernails gliding across the spinal cord of each book. It sounded like an instrument or the notes of running feet. She used both hands. She raced them, one shelf against the other, and she laughed. Her voice was sprawled out high in her throat, and when she eventually stopped and stood in the middle of the room, she spent many minutes looking for the shelves, to her fingers and back again. She had many books. How many books had she touched? How many had she felt? She walked over and did it again, this time much slower, with her hand facing forward, allowing the dough of her palm to feel the small hurdle of each book. It felt like magic, like beauty, as bright lines of light shone down from the chandelier. Several times she almost pulled the title from its place, but didn't dare disturb them. They were too perfect. To her left, she saw the woman again, standing by a large desk, still holding the small tower against her torso. She stood with a delighted crookedness. A smile appeared to have paralyzed her lips. Do you want me to... Liesl didn't finish the question, but actually perform what she was going to ask. Walking over and taking the books gently from the woman's arms, she then placed them into the missing piece in the shelf by the slightly open window. The outside cold was streaming in. For a moment, she considered closing it, but thought better of it. This was not her house, and the situation was not to be tampered with. Instead, she returned to the lady behind her, whose smile gave the appearance now of a bruise, and whose arms were hanging slenderly at each side, like girls' arms. What now? An awkwardness treated itself to the room, and Liesl took a final fleeting glance at the walls of books. In her mouth, the words fidgeted, but they came out in a rush. I should go. The It took 3 attempts to leave. She waited in the hallway for a few minutes, but the woman didn't come. And when Liesel returned to the entrance of the room, she saw her sitting at the desk, staring blankly at one of the books. She chose not to disturb her. In the hallway, she picked up the washing. This time, she avoided the sore spot in the floorboards, walking the long length of the corridor, favored the left-hand wall. When she closed the door behind her, a brass clank sounded in her ear, and with the washing next to her, she stroked the flesh of the wood. "Get going," she said. At first, she walked home dazed. The surreal experience with a room full of books and the stunned, broken woman walked alongside her. She could see it in the buildings, like a play. Perhaps it was similar to the way Papa had his Mein Kampf revelation. Wherever she looked, Liesel saw the mayor's wife with the books piled up in her arms. Around corners, she could hear the shuffle of her own hands distributing the shelves. She saw the open window, the chandelier of lovely light, and she saw herself leaving without so much as a word of thanks. Soon her sedated condition transferred to harassment and self-loathing. She began to rebuke herself. "You said nothing." Her head shook vigorously among the hurried footsteps. "Not a goodbye, not a thank you, that's the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. Nothing." Certainly she was a book thief, but that didn't mean she had no manners at all. It didn't mean she couldn't be polite. She walked a few minutes, struggling with indecision. On Munich Street, it came to an end. Just as she could make out the sign that said Steiner Schneidmeister, she turned and ran back. This time, there was no hesitation. She thumped the door, sending an echo of brass through the wood. It was not the mayor's wife, but the mayor himself, who stood before her. In her hurry, Liesel had neglected to notice the car that sat out front on the street. Mustached and black-suited, the man spoke. "Can I help you?" Liesel could say nothing, not yet. She was bent over, short of air. And unfortunately, the woman arrived when she had at least partially recovered. Ilse Hermann stood behind her husband to the side. "I forgot," Liesel said. She lifted the bag and addressed the mayor's wife. Despite the forced labor of breath, she fed the words through the gap in the doorway, between the mayor and the frame to the woman. Such was her effort to breathe that the words escaped only a few at a time. "I forgot. I just wanted," she said, "to thank you." The mayor's wife bruised herself again. Coming forward to stand beside her husband, she nodded very faintly, waited, and closed the door. It took Liesel a minute or so to leave. She smiled at the steps. So in this chapter, really think about how the mayor's wife was described as bruised and kind of emotionless, staring at a book, kind of like without any kind of expression at all. The window's open, it's cold in there, which we'd already alluded to before. So there's reason behind all of this. So think about that as you go into the next chapter.